Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video talking about Simucube's latest force feedback and, dare I say, direct drive brake accelerator and clutch pedal. I love this type of sim racing equipment, that's why I'm doing another video on it. But also the last video was more of a reaction to their launch event, whereas this video is me more going deep and looking at the pedal, how it operates and how that will affect sim racing, what it's likely you can get from it, and what this pedal does versus, say, having a tactile transducer or a vibration motor on the pedal, and how it's different. So I'm going to delve more into the nitty gritty. But we've got the funk music to play alongside this vibrating pedal here on the screen. Sign up to the Simucube website. The pre-orders for the pedal I think will be happening December, so if you've got money to waste and you're quick at buying stuff, because I'm sure they'll sell out, you might want to sign up here so you can so you can get one or three, depends how crazy you are. Now nicely on the website here, they've got the launch video they've done, but they've got this little graphic here which really helps us understand how this pedal sort of is broken down and constructed. It's worth me saying I'm not an electrician, I'm not an engineer, not a race driver. I don't know what I am. what am I? I don't know. It's a good question. I'm a person, and hopefully I can say stuff that's interesting, but you're not going to get particularly deep technical stuff from here, and I'm probably going to say stuff that's totally wrong and completely incorrect assumptions. So if I do and you know better, put it in the comments and then I'll correct myself, or I'll learn from those of you that do know what you're talking about. But hopefully I can still be entertaining, and we can all relish in the enjoyment of DD pedal talk. So here's the graphic on the screen of the pedal, which gives us a nice breakdown of things. As you can see, you've got the actual servo motor here that controls the movement of the pedal. And then I imagine the servo has some kind of, it looks to me like the servo would then go to some kind of helical gear system, worm gear, I don't know, that then the rails for the back of the pedal attached to, that allows the pedal to then move forwards and backwards. Potentially it might be set up so it removes or makes the gearing smoother, or allows it so that when the user pushes on it, it doesn't, the motor doesn't have to then resist a force that's too great. There'll be a whole lot of real subtle configuration and design choices that have gone into this pedal to actually make it operate to a high standard. Simucube have a reputation for producing some of the best, if not the best, sim racing equipment. So I've had a chance to talk to some of the guys from Simucube years back, and they were all mental, which is a good sign for sim racing equipment manufacturers. So yeah, we've got the gear, we've got the motor there, a small direct drive motor. There's some kind of, I imagine, a helical thing that then controls this rail. Now the key thing is that obviously with this configuration, all the feel of the pedal is basically controlled by the motor and the software that then controls that motor. Which is really nice, because that means you'll be able to configure the pedal however you want, ignoring the component of the pedal actually providing force feedback. The sort of resistive nature of the pedal, which you could argue is still a form of force feedback, though it'll just be, it's not a dynamic form of force feedback. You'll just set it in the software. But the fact is, by having this motor and this arrangement, you'll be able to set up any kind of like curve or weird shaped graph for how the pedal resists your input, if it's soft at first and then gets harder, or is hard soft hard, or whatever you want, which is really interesting from a sim racing perspective. Of one of the hardest things to set up with brake pedals for a sim is getting it so that you've got a nice feel from the pedal for how much brake pressure you're putting on, so you can equate that in the driving simulator to how hard you're pushing the brake. So perhaps to describe that better, the way I would set up a non-motorized traditional passive load cell brake pedal. So on this rig I have the Fanatec CSL Elite V2s. On the other sim rig we have the Husingfeld Ultimate Pluses. The way I set up those is that I have a bit of squish on the pedal initially with a softer elastomer. So when you first push on it, it squishes quite nice and easy. But then when you would get to like 75-80% force on the pedal, as it would be registered in the game, the pedal actually gets a lot harder. So I've got a much harder elastomer on it. So basically what it means is when I push the brake pedal, I can feel by how that pedal is resisting my pushing and how much the pedal moves and the feel of the brake pedal, I can feel that I can feel how much brake input I'm putting on, which makes it a lot easier to get to that sort of with a lot of race cars, especially in iRacing. They basically lock up once you get to about 78%, between 68 and 75% or so brake pressure. They will lock, so you don't ever really want to be pushing more than that a lot of the time. Or if you are in that zone where it's likely to lock up plus more than 70% brake input, for example, you really want to have a good feel for that on the brake pedal, so you can then know that you're in that zone of potential lock-up death. So with those elastometers, you can set that up so that you know exactly where that point is, where it's going to potentially lock, and then you can also learn from the feel of that. You just know, sort of intuitively, a muscle memory feel that, oh, this is where I am on the brake pedal due to how it feels. In a real car, you use G-forces through your body to feel how hard, if you can push the brake harder or not, and then you can feel how much the longitudinal slip and the grip of the tyres, you can feel through your body if the tyres are going to purchase or they're starting to slip. Unfortunately, just about every driving simulator doesn't actually have any force feedback that lines up to that. Assetto Corsa is the closest and probably most detailed in that regard, but no other sim, AMS2 a little bit, but no other real sim really gives you the detail of force feedback to modulate the brake from what you're feeling through the steering wheel. So that's all in a passive sense, and obviously with these Simucube pedals, you'll be able to emulate that aspect of your traditional load cell pedals just by configuring how the motor resists your input, which is absolutely fantastic. And rather nicely, because it's all software controlled, you could have it so that you jump in a Formula 1 car, you could have it so that the brake doesn't move as much or is stiffer, and then if you jump into a road car, you could have it so that the brake is a lot more squishy, or however you want to set it up. Obviously in real life, and there's lots of examples of this, even in Formula 1, some Formula 1 cars have quite a bit of pedal movement, some don't. It's up to the driver how they set it up. But the point is, for you as a sim racer, you'll be able to set it up however you want with any car, and as you jump from car to car, it will be able to just automatically change because it's software changing it, rather than if you were using non-DD pedals, you would have to take off the elastometers and swap them over and everything, which with the ImSim pedals, the Talento pedals, that's not actually that hard to do or that time consuming. You can watch my video on the ImSim pedals, but obviously this is, with these Simucube pedals, it will be literally instant, and you'll have much more range of what you can adjust and control with it due to it all being controlled by a servo motor. Also, the aspect of well, actually, I'll talk about that later. Looking at this here, looks like they've put the load cell. It does say load cell there. They've put the load cell in the middle of the actual pedal arm here. So the load cell and that'll be measuring the actual input, the actual weight that you're putting on the pedal. The way this load cell works is it's measuring the flex in the metal here. Very small amount of flex. There's basically it's called a Wheatstone bridge. It measures voltage differential due to flex in the metal. Google Wheatstone bridge, watch YouTube videos on that, and you'll understand how load cells work. But that's obviously separate to the motor arrangement and everything, so the actual registering of the force that you're putting on the pedal is effectively separate to everything else that's going on down here, which is quite interesting. By having the load cell separate probably means it's easier to service if you wanted to. If you wanted to swap the load cell out, or you know, if it broke or whatever you're doing. It looks like a really nice, tidy design, to be honest. Interestingly, the pedal height from the videos I've seen of it looked like the pedal height's quite low, and also the angle of this is the way it's set up looks like the leverage is quite low, and I guess it's going to be, from a Simucube perspective, it's going to be a balance between getting the maximum amount of utility out of what this servo motor can offer, and then this gearing arrangement down here, and what's going to also give the smoothest result and the best feel from the motor and the gearing. There'll have been a lot of design considerations, I would imagine, in terms of how this is all configured to really maximise that the performance of the power of the motor, the resistance of the motor, and the smoothness of everything. And I do worry a little bit that there could potentially be a little bit of play or a little bit less smoothness, like absolute smoothness in this, compared to a load cell pedal that just used an elastomer, you know, type system, your traditional load cell pedal, because there's you do have a lot of elements in this. I'm sure Simucube have thought about that, but I can't see this being as millimeter or sub-millimeter smooth in feel as a system that didn't have a motor in it. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? It'd be awesome if I am, because then I'll struggle to see any real big disadvantages with these pedals, other than probably price. The other thing we're saying is, obviously they do look pretty long. Nicely from what we've seen of the details of them, it seems like everything is contained within the pedal here. So it looks like the power supply potentially and the controller board and everything is contained within the pedal unit. So yeah, the pedals are pretty long, but if everything is contained within the pedal, it's a fairly neat and tidy solution. To be honest, if you were getting this type of pedal, I'm sure they've thought about this, but if you're getting this type of pedal, you're probably going to be putting it on some kind of T-slot sim rig, some custom solution, where the length of it's not going to be the biggest. You know, you're not going to be using these under your desk. Now, so an interesting aspect is in terms of the actual force feedback from the pedals. There's some interesting differences between this and, say, putting a tactile transducer on the pedal. If you check out my video, it's called 150 pound motion rig. It's technically not a motion rig, bit of clickbait there. But in that video, I show how I've got on one of my simulators, on my Mecha Cup 1 pedals, tactile transducers on the brake and the accelerator, and also a tactile transducer on my seat. And you can use them with SimHub to get really good feeling for wheel slip, is how I ended up using it. You could use it for ABS as well. When ABS kicks in, you can have your pedal vibrate, which isn't too far off what it might necessarily feel in a car, just from the vibration. So tactile transducers actually work fantastic, and obviously going to be a lot cheaper than this sort of pedal solution. But the limitation of tactile transducers, from my experience, I've spent hours messing around with them, the limitation really is that there's a very specific range that each size tactile transducer puck, each size puck has a very specific frequency at which it can resonate detailed, and it also has it's very limited to the degree to which it can vibrate and what strength it vibrates. So in terms of conveying very precise slip detail, from like there's a lot of slip, or there's a little bit of slip, and there's a medium amount of slip, it can be quite vague and difficult to really get a detailed feel of slip from a tactile transducer. Though it is pretty good, like it's pretty decent still. The fact is, with a Seto Corsa, you can tell all this stuff through the steering wheel, so you don't even really need tactile transducers, or you wouldn't really need force feedback pedals. But with sims that don't have particularly decent force feedback for that sort of stuff, it's nice to have. But as I say, tactile transducers are quite limited in what they can actually convey and the range of information they can convey. Whereas, because this is using a servo motor as opposed to effectively a speaker, the degree of detail that these could put out, even in terms of vibrations, and the range of vibrations is potentially way higher than what you could ever get from a tactile transducer. So for feeling where slip's starting, and if you're in the sort of optimal amount of slip, this sort of pedal should be a lot better. Also, of course, unlike a tactile transducer, this is literally capable of moving the pedal, not only in terms of you setting it up in terms of how the pedal resists your movement, but it's capable of fully physically moving the pedal in response to what's happening in the driving simulator. Probably there's not that many situations where you really do want to be drastically moving a pedal whilst you're driving. And most of the situations where you might want to do that would actually be detrimental to esports performance and racing performance. So, for example, brake fade, or I don't know, the wheels getting up to temperature, or like the gap between when you push the pedal and it engaging the brake, or God knows what. Like, most of the time when a real car pedal's flopping around a lot or not being immediate is a negative thing rather than a positive thing. Maybe like flexing, because obviously fluids don't compress, but you've got all these cables and systems in a real car where it's going through all these pumps and God knows what. So when you push on it, there's cables flexing everything, which allows the pedal to move. These are all like negative things, really. If your goal was absolute input precision, these are things you'd probably want to get rid of in a real car, which you can just get rid of in a driving simulator using budget sim racing pedals. But simulation sometimes is about simulating things that are bad. So from a simulation standpoint, you could do all these things, and that could be fun for a lot of people. You'll just have the degree of options available. It is insane with this. Now that actually can also be a negative as well, in that to really get the most out of these pedals, it's going to be one of those things where you probably would want to set it up with each sim and with each car, and you end up with this thing where you've got you can just be. Sim racers probably love this. I kind of like this kind of stuff. I mean, sim racing is about twiddling knobs, as opposed to driving. But you could just spend so much time messing around with stuff rather than actually driving. And it depends what you want out. But if you enjoy that messing around and just experimenting, you'll love that. But if you want to get in and drive, potentially this could just be a black hole of fiddling despair, and also a sort of arbitrary fiddling despair. There might not actually be some objective, quantifiable thing to get to, and having all those things there might make it that you get frustration from just having it not ever feeling perfect. There's something that has to be said for simple load cell pedals. Say the Fanatec, I keep going on about them, I really love these Fanatec CSL8 V2s, but also Mika Cup 1s, Husqvarna Sprints. There's something to be said for, like, set your pedal up once, leave it, and just concentrate on the driving and just enjoy what the simulator has to offer, rather than messing around with hardware or potentially blaming your problems or blaming your dissatisfaction on the hardware. it can often be yourself, and you just need to get better, you know. So it's pros and cons, isn't it, for that kind of stuff. I do think it's great with Simucube, though. I'm really glad that Simucube are the company that have done this. I know D-Box had a solution with a fluid pedal system, but that wasn't really. I tried a beta version of that, and I didn't think it was really fully ready as a sort of mass market home unit. Whereas the nice thing with Simucube is, I think Simucube are really great when it comes to their software, and especially their software and how it integrates with the hardware and how they present that as well. I don't own a Simucube wheel myself. I've got an OSW. That's not Simucube, but I have used Simucube hardware at driver training centres, and friends that own Simucube software. So it's really nice software, really nicely done. So it's when you've got something like this that can potentially be a bit of a nightmare, it's great that we've got Simucube doing the software behind that, and that software component with servo motors. It can't be understated or overstated. The software it's actually as important, if not more important, than the hardware in many ways. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare marriage of software and hardware to get the most out of this sort of equipment. I mean, and as I said before, ironically with sim racing, even outside of this pedals software and hardware for the pedals specifically, the fact of the matter is a lot of driving simulators, there's massive issues with the tyre models or massive issues with the simulator, and you could use whatever equipment you want with it. If the car is set up really badly in the sim, or the sim itself, like the tyre model, is fundamentally messed up in certain situations, no equipment is ever going to fix that. But you know, I digress. So what's awesome though, actually, with this obviously being a fully, you know, you can do whatever you want with them. I think, as I said I think I briefly talked about it in the previous video, is how these pedals could also be used as flight simulator rudder control pedals. It's not going to be completely analogous to a flight sim rudder, because in a rudder this part of the pedal would move. It does depend, actually. Some aeroplanes do have rudders that are like driving pedals, but most, or a lot of aircraft, a lot of light aircraft, they move on like rail. It would be like a rail type solution. So it wouldn't be completely analogous, but in terms of functionality, you could have two of these pedals. The software could link them together, so when you push the right pedal, it moves the other pedal, so they'd be in a center position by default. And when you push the pedals, they automatically go like that. And then you might even be able to configure it in such a way where you could still use the load cell, maybe as a toe brake in some way. I'm not quite sure how you do that, but you know, it's awesome. The options that just slapping a servo motor on things brings, it's potentially infinite. Now, what else is there? What else is there worth saying about these? I'm probably missing a point that I wanted to talk about. I mean, with this video is already getting too long, but if you're still here, congratulations. Type in the comment section, I'm still here and I regret it. I think the actual design of the pedals visually looks great. I say the length of it could be a bit of a problem on some rigs, but any T-slot rig, which is probably what you're going to put these on, shouldn't really be an issue. Oh, as an interesting point, so some people commented on the previous video, and it was about the idea of cheating with these pedals, in that you could actually take the game's telemetry and use that to cause the pedal to move in a way that stops you from locking up, for example. So if the telemetry detects that the car is slipping too much, or you are actually locking up, well, the pedal could automatically back off so that you can't then lock up. Or with the throttle pedal, even in a car in a simulator that doesn't have traction control, it could, the throttle could move away. If it picks up the rears are slipping too much, it can detect that, and the pedal moves away from you. Now, you could actually do that without having a motor. You could do that in the software with any pedals, to be honest. So people wanting to make cheats for sim racing could already do it without this equipment, just using the telemetry data and then editing how the inputs work on those sims. I don't think it's going to be a huge problem, but it's interesting to think about. Now, one thing that I think might be a big issue for these pedals is that really, for them to absolutely operate at their best, you really are going to need integration from the actual simulators themselves, like the software developers of the simulator, Affialte 2, iRacing, AC, ACC, Automobilista 2. It really needs to be integrated into those sims, rather than having Simucube having to be dependent on the telemetry from the simulator to get these things. So if you've used SimHub, as again, absolutely fantastic software used for driving displays, tactile transducers and everything, that uses the game telemetry. And what you soon find is that different simulators output telemetry somewhat different in terms of the strength of the telemetry forces, how it scales. But even some sims don't have telemetry for certain things that might be really useful for these pedals, for example. But also some simulators have a delay between when the telemetry is sent out of the simulator to whatever the Simucube would latch onto, or even what SimHub latches onto. So for stuff like if you want a really responsive brake pedal to react to slip or who knows what, unless the Simucube software was integrated into the game's code directly, you could find that there either isn't support for something that's really nice with the pedal, or there's support but it's a bit delayed and just feels a bit weird. I think that honestly, I think in the long run, I think the most utility and what most people will get out of these pedals will be, rather than the sort of responsive force feedback components, the biggest value from this will just be the way that you can set the feel of the brake pedal, more so than the actual force feedback from the pedal. It'll be being able to have different brake, accelerator, clutch, feel, depth, movement, from car to car, because that's something you'll just be able to set up in the Simucube software without issue, and it should be very consistent from sim to sim. I mean, recently I bought an AccuForce wheel just so I could mess around with the software. That wheel allows you to generate your own force feedback, separate to the game's force feedback, and even with that, it doesn't always work consistently from sim to sim, and there's like weird issues with the software interacting with the simulator in certain ways. The more that the software has to communicate with the simulator, and the simulators obviously are just they're not necessarily aware or designed to work with that equipment, the more you could potentially have problems, and the more potential you even have for stuff like one piece of software crashing or another piece of software crashing and that breaking stuff, which happens sometimes with the AccuForce wheel. So that could also happen with the Simucube. But as I say, Simucube have actually done a fantastic job with their software in the past, so I think it'd be less of an issue than what I found with the AccuForce wheel. It's just the more complexity you start adding to these things, the larger the likelihood there is for issues to arise. And at the end of the day, I mean, I absolutely love stuff like this, but at the end of the day, honestly, sometimes you can't just beat whatever's the most simple solution that achieves the result. And bog standard load cell pedals that aren't moving and doing all this random stuff, and bog standard DD wheel often is an absolutely fantastic way of just having a good time playing driving sims. But you know, anyway, that's a more in-depth look and talk about the Simucube pedal. I'm genuinely really interested to see how this pans out, and what else Simucube will do. This is probably one of the most exciting things to have, or most interesting pieces of hardware outside of VR and when DD wheels first started to come out, I mean, I've been into DD wheels since 2010 or so, but this is like genuinely the most exciting thing for someone that's a haptics nerd like myself in the space of driving simulators. Well, so I don't know. Let me know what you think. If there's any things I've missed out in this that you think would be interesting to talk about. But yeah, thanks for watching this. Appreciate all the viewers. Appreciate the hardcore fans that tune in and waste their lives watching me and this content. Thanks for subscribing. Those of you that do, that are new, thanks for liking. Till the next one though. Happy tea drinking. Take care and goodbye everyone.